particular series. Anyway, God's not finished with me yet. Kind of stuck in my head from what Dave said, from what I was reading in Joshua, which I'm listening to somebody else speak onto it, and what has prompted me now to put together this little series. That of course then assumes there's something to finish. We have a mission. We have a mission. And it's time to finish it. I want you to just raise your hands, which is almost always a dangerous thing to get on camera, and I don't want you to raise them yet. I sometimes go to Alpha Street and do a lesson and I say, put your hands up here, and before I can say the rest of the sentence, they'll put their hands up. No, not yet. Wait till I finish one. I want you to put your hands up. If you remember the day, or time, the theory of the time, when you felt God calling you. You remember that time when, it may have been a long while ago now, but when you felt God calling you in some way. I'm not saying how, what the call was. And you remember Him calling you to something, or okay. Hands down. How many of you now? Another hands up. How many of you here sense the Lord saying, "I've got some work for you to do. I've got something, a task for you to do." That may have been again years ago. It may be more present. But how many of you have kind of said, "Yeah, I've actually got not just God calling me to become a Christian or come to church, but to actually do something." Hands up. Okay, that's encouraging. Hands down. If you didn't put your hand up, if you didn't put your hand up, can I suggest that you just over the next week or two really try and tune into God? Because if you haven't really sensed that God has called you or given you something to do, then you really need to get on your knees and say, "Lord, what is it that I'm here for? What do you want me to do? Why am I here? Why are you keeping me here today? What task have you given me to do?" And just make that your question in prayer. On your knees if you can, over the next few days, the next few weeks, and see what the Lord said to you. Because I pretty much guarantee that if you make that your prayer, God's going to answer that. You're going to say, "Yeah, I've got this for you." Don't be scared. Don't be timid. But to say, "Lord, what is it that you're calling me to do? I'm really a little bit misty on this at the moment. Can you clarify this for me? Show me what it is you want me to do." Doesn't matter what age you are. Doesn't matter your experience. Doesn't matter even where you think you are in your walk in faith. Make that your prayer over the next few days and weeks. Okay. Maybe those that put their hands up, saying, "Yeah, I really sense that God called me or has given me a task to do." And you may be kind of thinking, some of you, I tried it. I tried doing what God asked me to do. And I seem to be getting really nowhere with it. I ran with it for a while, it was okay, but I guess I didn't really finish it because it just didn't seem to really happen or come to any conclusion. Didn't seem to be getting anywhere. I just seemed to be going around in circles. So we're looking at Joshua today and the next couple of weeks. I would encourage you, if you've got your Reader's One booklet still, I hope you have, that you continue to go through those and that passage as well. This is not kind of an alternative, this is an addition, this passage from Joshua. So we're looking at Joshua. You remember the story. He's leading the people of God, and he's now gone into the promised land, that God promised them, why it's called the promised land, and he's reached the first main city, which is occupied at the moment. The city of Jericho. Now, as I was looking through the story and digging a little bit for a while, I read something which I found interesting. I think Dave will particularly find this interesting, but a lot of us should as well. Joshua, look at his life for a couple of seconds. Up to this point in the storyline, Joshua 5 and 6, up to this point, Joshua had lived for about 20 years in Egypt, of all countries, because that's where God's people have become slaves. And you remember, was it last week I was talking about God's people being slaves in Egypt? So about 20 years Joshua was there under the Egyptians as a slave. So that was Joshua's life, 20 years. Then, because Moses took them out of Egypt, and they wandered in the wilderness for how long?
40 years.
Oh, I ought to wait now. 40 years. They wandered around in the wilderness. So that's 20 years as a slave, 40 years wandering around in the wilderness. And I don't know if you've ever seen the wilderness, and perhaps I should have put up a slide. I've been in part of it undercover. But you know, it is just rolling hills of rock and sand, as far as the eye can see. No plants, no buildings, no water, no visible animal life. Imagine doing that for 40 years of your life. 20 years a slave, you come out, I mean, you kind of understand why some of the people of God were kind of moaning a bit. You got us out of Egypt for this, because it was their own fault that they moaned, and so they ended up wandering around 40 years. But 40 years wandering around, nothing to see, nothing to do, just wandering, living a life, an existence, if you like, for 40 years. And that was what Joshua was doing as well. So at this point in Joshua 5 and 6, it didn't matter a lot the last couple of weeks, you know. How old is he? Come on, 20 years in Egypt. Sorry? 60. And Joshua, got a real understanding of God, real understanding of God's leading. I mean, he wouldn't be where he is at this point if he didn't have that. And yet, for 60 years, he's been either a slave or wandering around in the desert. I wonder if he was kind of, is this it? Lord, slave, wandering, is this it? You know, I sensed you were calling me, but I've just not been much of a life really, God. You know, I know you called me, I know we're the people of God, but this is it. And now, after all this time, they are entering the promised land. The land flowing with milk and honey. And Jericho is a great land flowing with milk and honey. When they mean milk, they mean kind of water. There's a river that goes into Jericho even today. And there's date palms and so on. That's kind of the honey. Nice and sweet. And there they are. They've gone into the land, but the first thing they come against is this walled city. And God says, okay, this is what I want you and your men to do. I want you to walk around the outside of the city walls. 20 years a slave, 40 years wandering, and they get into the promised land and they come up against the wall and God says, just walk around it, will you? For a day, and then go home. Go back to camp. And then the second day, get up, have a wander around the outside of the city. Go back. How many of us here think that our life seems a bit like just wandering, walking in the desert, even walking around the outside of a wall? And some of us have reached the age of 50, 60, 70. And perhaps we're kind of thinking, is that it? Nothing much to show for it? And you hear about other people, there's always other people, isn't there? You hear about other people who are, reaching out and winning souls for Christ. They're serving in ministry somewhere, they're helping people, they're healing people, they're preaching, they're leading groups, and they're in big churches and all of that, and you think, I just seem to be wandering around. Or at best walking around the outside of a wall. And in fact, there's a lot of Christians in our country, I think, who kind of have made up their mind that walking around the outside of a wall is it. Well, it's not much, but I'm doing what God wants me to do, so I'll just keep walking. And that'll probably be my life. Because they think, well, walking around is my task. I'm faithful to God's calling because that's what He's asked me to do, so I'll just walk around. Translate that into our situation. I'll just turn up at a prayer meeting. I'll just go to church. I'll just do a little bit for God. For 1 year at a time, 2 years at a time, 3 years at a time, 4 years at a time, 5 years at a time, 6 years at a time, you kind of think, but I've done this 6 times, Lord. I've been walking around the walls, so to speak, figuratively speaking, for so long I've almost forgotten the work that you've called me to. In fact, maybe I'm starting to think that this is your calling. Walking in the wilderness, marching around the outside of the city wall. And I've said this before, because it was said to me, always remember your calling. Thank you. Someone remembers what I say. Always remember your calling. Because a lot of you put your hands up. Yeah, I remember God calling me. Maybe you had a little image come up on your mind when I even said it. Always remember your calling. Always look to that and I remember God calling me. It may have been 20 years ago. It may have been 40 years ago. It may have been more recent than that. But I remember it. And some of us get actually used to walking, as I say, around the city. Well, we kind of like it, actually. We've kind of got used to it. In the UK, as Christians, we'll kind of just turn up to church. And we know that some of our friends know we go to church, and they kind of, yeah, it's good for you. And you go to church, and we do our bit, and we go home, and we carry on. It's not too difficult. And there are times when you think this walking around and around is a bit boring, but hey, God's taught me to that, hasn't He? I I've got a better place to go eventually, but for now I guess it's just wandering and walking. That's not too bad. I get to meet with people. I get to worship with people. We have a laugh together. It's not too bad. We kind of go around the wall, we meet up, and we go back to camp. I can't really remember why I'm walking around the wall anymore, but I hope Dave won't mind me saying, sure he won't, you can tell me afterwards, that he's been faithfully walking for years. For many years, as Joshua did. And when some people have given up or have stopped for a bit, Dave has kept marching. And there's been absolutely nothing wrong with that walk. God told the Israelites to walk around the wall, the outside. Just keep walking, which they did. And then a couple of weeks ago, Dave had this encounter with the Lord which kind of stopped him walking. And the Lord said, there's something more. You still got something to do for me. And it's now refocusing on that task, as you heard this morning. And I think kind of Dave's in that position where he's ready now. He's been marching around the wall. And he's waiting now for the command. He's kind of done with the marching bit. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. And the one thing I heard in a message about this was, don't stop at 6. Never give up on what God has asked you to do. Oh, well, I've done this 3 times in my life. I've done this 4 times in my life. I've done this 5 times in my life. I'm getting weary now at 6 times in my life. Lord, I'm not quite sure if I need to do this anymore. Imagine all God's people doing that. Marched around this wall 6 times. We've been in slavery, we've been through the wilderness, and now 6 times around the wall. It's time to blow the horn. It's time to shout. Let's not get, as we kind of hear news items and as we talk about things and as we look at church attendance around the UK and so on, kind of think, I've done this. I've been there. I've got the t-shirt. I'm wearing down 5 times, 6 times. I'm retiring. Somebody else can do their one. It's time to move on to the 7th. Walk down the city. And next week we're going to look at that. And next week we're going to look at perspective. Because I read this passage like you many times over, but I read this with new eyes the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I saw something in this passage that I've never seen before. I've been attentive. So we're going to look at perspective, and we're going to look at how to take the city next week. Don't miss it.
I'll bring my shout up.
This week's challenge, though. For those of you who have felt like your life has been just about walking and wandering, then this week, look back. I don't often say look back to me. It's not always a good idea to look back. But look back for when you sensed God calling you. Giving you a challenge, a mission, a task, a ministry, call it what you will. And remember that day, or that period of time. Remember it and thank God for it, and ask Him to prepare you to finish the job. I'm ready for the 7th day role. And next week I'll take you through that. If you weren't one to put your hand up today and you've never really felt God calling you to do something for Him, I actually think you've missed the calling. Nobody didn't call you. You've missed it somehow. Because I guarantee that God has called you. So this week, if you're in that situation, I want you to say to get on your knees and pray and keep asking the Lord this week, and for however long it takes, Lord, what are you calling me to? What is it that you want me to do? I didn't just turn up at Highfield by some fluke or by some mistake. I'm not here worshipping you, Lord, just because it's what other people do and it makes me feel better. I believe that you've called me to something. To do this side of heaven. What is it, Lord? What is it? And next week I'll help you to take the finishing task. The Lord said today, I've not finished with you yet. I've got more for you to do. Take the land. It's in front of you. 4, 5, 6. So, you know your challenges this week. Wherever you are, got it in your mind what you've got to do. Let's stand and pray, and then we'll sing our last song. Stand with me. Come on, you can stand up. All God's people stood up.
Thank you.